Okay, good. All right, I'm glad we're all here, except for Elizabeth. So today is lesson planning for ESL and TESOL students. And as I was saying, some of you are pretty up on how to do a good lesson plan. Today's homework, though, will be again, and those of you, Ruth and Hannah, please submit a different one that I've never seen, a different lesson plan. So what the homework is to submit a lesson plan, and then next week you're going to teach it. So you have a time to present your lesson plan to the class. And teaching it is just walking us through it. So we don't have to pretend to be your students or anything. Just walk us through your lesson plan and show us say, if you have any multimedia, if you have any videos, YouTube, or if you have any songs, or if you have anything else too, then, show us the link and show us some of it. So that'll be due next week. Okay. So today we're just going to walk through what makes up a good lesson plan and suggestions on how to do it. There are so many different lesson plans that you can find, so many templates that it's crazy. But today in this lesson, you'll learn really the specific things that you do need to include in a lesson plan. Okay. So what we've got is a carefully structured TESOL lesson plan, guides your curriculum as a teacher, and provides measurable objectives for students. However, even the best teachers don't always have time to write their plans from scratch. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so of course, if you have a curriculum, and again, we can go back to the mainstream education, and like some of your kids are involved in, but if you do have a curriculum, then you take that curriculum and you base your lesson plans on that curriculum. So fortunately, there are some great websites like Lanternfish ESL and Off2 Classes. Of course, I put this together, I think last year. So, and there are many more places where you can look websites for lesson plans, for free lesson plans. So let's take a look at why it's necessary to plan lessons for teaching English, how to write your own plans, and top sites for finding free ESL lesson plans. So here's an example of a basic lesson plan. And you'll see here, it has unit and topic, lesson number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many lessons are going to be in this. Strands, meaning what else are you going to do, parts of it, and your level. And then lesson objective, of course, key knowledge and skills teachers should activate or achieve in the lesson. So this is objectives, and I think we'll go through the objectives, but objectives are basically what it is that the students are going to learn from this lesson and what they should carry away with them. What is it that they will acquire? And then you have the lesson structure, how much time it's going to take, introduction of the topic, teaching approaches, how you're going to do it. And then, so this section usually is longer, of course, than this, because you can time it out, 90-minute or 60-minute class. You'll time out 10 minutes for an icebreaker, and 10 minutes for an introduction to the topic, and 20 minutes for an activity or a video or whatever. So you're going to time out each one of those sections. And so that means that you'll know where you should be 60 minutes, 90 minutes into the class, that you should be able to time yourself, time the students, and get in and get out, so to speak. So first, what are ESL lesson plans and why do I need them? Well, I'll tell you why you need them. I never thought I needed them. I never liked to do them. I always like to do it kind of my way, and I shouldn't say that. But I really think unless you're required by your school to turn them in, then you can do just about whatever you feel is going to achieve what you want to achieve. So unless you have to turn these in, and often as a beginning teacher, you have to turn in lesson plans. Once a week, you have to show what you're going to do for the week. And therefore, you have to follow a procedure. And you have to follow that school's template. Usually every school, every class or whatever will have templates that they want you to follow. And all you have to do, if you have the curriculum, like a textbook, which always helps you, and the curriculum, then you just plug it in. You just plug the information into it and then turn it in. But if you don't have to turn them in, then you can do just about anything. I mean, you can jot it down on a piece of paper because you've done it before. You know, you feel confident, and the time, you know how long it takes. It's like me doing these PowerPoints. I always try to end up, you know, an hour and a half later at the end. Not always is it perfect, but most of the time it is. But I've done it before. So let's just watch this little video. It's only 3 minutes long about what does a lesson plan contain. Everybody can see and hear?
Yes.
Yes? Yes, good.
Then we have a set of objectives and aims. Here, the learner objective. Then we have a set of objectives and aims. Here, the learner objective.
Okay, sorry. Always starting from there. Well, class. So you got the teacher, who is you, of course, date and time, class level, the room you're in, expected numbers of students, and then the context. Here is you're going to teach the colors, fruits, clothing, etc.
Objectives relate to what we're hoping the students are going to be able to do by the end of your lesson. And quite often that can be a useful way of writing out what the objectives are. So we would start the sentence, by the end of the lesson, the students should be able to, and then a list of 2, 3, or 4 items that we're expecting the students to be able to do by completing this lesson. The learner objectives are different to the teacher aims. The teacher aims are what you are expecting from that lesson itself. Now, when you first start teaching, quite a normal aim might be to complete the lesson successfully, to get through the whole thing without having any problems. As time goes on and you become more experienced, then what you would expect is that these teacher aims become more and more specific. So some examples of things that might be in your aims here might be things like to improve my board work, to increase student talk time, and to reduce teacher talk time, and so on and so forth. The next section is going to relate to what we might call anticipated problems, and they'll be anticipated problems for both our students and for ourselves. The types of problems that we may anticipate from our students is that they will have difficulties with pronunciation, they may have difficulties with the level of the grammar and being able to put it into context, and so on and so forth. Anticipated problems for ourselves. Types of problems that we can put in here would be things like making sure that we stick to the plan, making sure that the focus of the lesson is maintained throughout the whole lesson, and so on and so forth. So a set of problems, anticipated problems for the teacher and for the students. Now, because this is part of the planning process, if we've anticipated problems, then it's fairly reasonable to assume that we thought about what we can do if those problems do occur. So one of the examples we had here was that we were anticipating problems with their pronunciation. So a solution to that problem would be to do some form of drilling to help them with the pronunciation problem. One of the problems we had with the anticipated problems for the teacher was that we wanted to make sure that the lesson flows smoothly, and so we need to refer to our plan throughout the lesson. Now, this doesn't mean that we stand with a piece of paper in our hands. That doesn't generate any confidence from our students whatsoever, but there's no reason at all why we shouldn't have a set of bullet points on a piece of paper on a desk in front of us that every now and again we can just refer to quickly to make sure that we're following our plan in sequence. So these are some of the things that might be on our lesson plan. What we're going to do now is to fill out an actual lesson plan using this particular form.
And we'll do that in a little bit, I think. Okay, good. So ASL lesson plans provide a structured breakdown of what you intend to do during class time. They require careful planning in advance and ensure that each lesson you teach has a purpose and advances the overall curriculum and class goals. And if you don't know these, then you really need to get those down before you start teaching. So each ESL lesson plans keep you on track when teaching and help you fill class time with relevant and appropriate activities. Without a lesson plan, you may find yourself unsure of how to fill leftover time in class, repeating the same activities until students lose interest or not meeting student objectives. So here it is. Here's a template for young learners. You can use this template to create fun and engaging lessons for your young learners. Of course, the outcome and the objectives are not as, and say it's preschool or something, it's not as stringent as if you're doing an elementary, intermediate, advanced class. So this could look like you welcome the class, welcome the children at the door, make your greetings personalized, get ready, set the children down, get them ready. So all of this, usually you don't have to go through, but when you're talking about young learners, this is something that you have to deal with. So then you go through the schedule with the students of what's going to happen today or what's going to happen in your class. And then have circle time, of course, present and review the topics of the week, use flashcards, all kinds of things. And usually circle time too means that you get to sit around in a circle with your students and talk to them about how they're feeling today and so on. Topic work, so you do the activities you planned in your weekly plan for the day, and then tidy up and say goodbye. So young learners, really different. An ESL lesson plan or a TEFL lesson plan is a document that helps ESL teachers organize and structure their teaching so that it can be more effective. It usually includes the overall objectives for the lesson, a breakdown of how the time in class will be used, what activities the students will participate in, and what materials will be used. I mean, that's pretty simple. If you have a curriculum, each lesson plan and its objectives should be tied into the overall goals of the curriculum. So questions to ask before making a lesson plan. Give these questions some thought before you outline your TEFL lesson plans. Knowing the answers will save you time and aggravation down the road. So number one, will you review what the school is teaching the students? Or will you create new learning goals? And that seems to be kind of silly. It's doing more work than you have to. If the target language will be new, be sure it's appropriate for the student's level. Number two, will you focus on speaking, reading, writing, or listening, or a combination? So because you're not just teaching like a social studies class, you're teaching and usually a combination of speaking, reading, writing, or listening, then your lesson plan is a bit longer. You're going to have to include all of these things and how they are included in the whole lesson. And number 3, will you teach alone or will you have help? The simplest games, for example, can be difficult to teach without translation unless you're very prepared. So that's mostly with younger students. So how do you structure your lesson? What should I consider? Objectives. We say it over and over and over, but the objectives are very important. So when creating a lesson plan, it's important to take into account what your objectives are for the lesson. In other words, what is the target language you want to teach, and what do you hope your students will be able to do by the end of the lesson? What are objectives in ESL lesson planning? Objectives in ESL lesson planning are also known as lesson aims, student goals, learning goals, or learning objectives. The goal of objectives stays the same. Defining a specific and measurable outcome of a lesson that is centered on your students' achievement. Usually, a lesson should have not just one, but several ESL learning objectives that are linked to a certain time frame or task. Now, everybody's picture is off, and I feel like I'm alone here, teaching to myself. So some people need to turn your videos on. You can't just teach to a unless you're off the internet. Okay, thank you. So why are objectives important in ESL lesson planning? Your lesson objectives drive everything you do throughout your lesson. They can be the difference between an aimless lesson and one that intentionally brings students to a step closer to meeting their language goals. Here are some reasons why ESL lesson objectives are important and how they can help you as a teacher. Because that's the way you're going to assess your students, your objectives. This is what you're trying to teach them. And at the end, so you have your lesson plan and you see, okay, these are my objectives. They're going to be able to define this. They're going to be able to pronunciate, 7 new vocabulary words. They're going to this and this and that. And then by the end of the class, you're going to be able to measure that. You're going to see, did that happen? This is what's really important. It's not just teaching the lesson. It is understanding and seeing and measuring and assessing how your students did. And then that tells you, okay, what do I have to teach tomorrow then? What do I have to teach down the road? What do I have to review? So you can't get through a day without assessing, because you don't know what's going to come tomorrow if you don't assess today. So you'll write the rest of the lesson plan to help you accomplish your objectives. Think of it as a lighthouse that helps you stay on course while navigating the treacherous waters of keeping the students' attention alive and kicking. And you all know, we've talked about it a million times, how difficult it is in young learners. So you're clipping, your pace is really quick. You got 2 minutes here and 2 minutes there sometimes, compared to just an English class of adults. You got 20 minutes here, another 15 minutes over here. You're going deep, you're going into the lesson. So how do you write ESL learning objectives? When you're planning your lessons, the first step is to ask these questions to establish the lesson objectives. What am I teaching in this lesson? Why am I teaching it? What will the students be able to do by the end of this lesson? How will I know if the students have learned what I want to teach them? In other words, how will I measure the success of the lesson? So that means what? What does that mean? How do I measure the success of the lesson? Anybody?
I think probably can do some test.
Yeah, good. Yes. So you're going to test them somehow, or you're going to observe them doing a presentation, or you're going to observe them maybe playing a game. That would be more for young learners, and to see how they're able to how successful they are at playing the game. But this again, how will I measure the success of the lesson is like, should be number one, because this is what you have to end up doing in the end. So by answering these questions, your objectives will become clear. They will form the irreplaceable framework for your lesson. Okay, the first step in writing an objective is choosing a measurable and specific verb. This is really strange, but it's true. Depending on what you're teaching and age group you're working with, you'll need to choose an active verb that's adjusted to your students' abilities. So I have a list of those verbs in 1 second. So defining objectives makes you examine your lesson content to ensure that there is an actual need for the topic you're teaching and the activities you're planning to do. Plus, you have a book and you have every lesson plan in there. And you can go, if you say, okay, well, I think I need to teach them this, and you can go back and say, oh no, I taught that last week. So this is what's also important, is to keep track of these lesson plans, put them in your lesson plan book. And then also you can use them next year round. So your class will run smoothly if you have a solid plan for how each lesson element fits into your overall teaching goal. So here are some of those verbs. Well, actually, yeah, so that's why you're using these verbs. They are the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So remembering, of course, right? What is remembering in say, an objective? What would that look like?
For example, if we teach the vocabulary spelling, and if the students they can spell the vocabulary correct. So yeah, that means they remember the word.
Okay, yeah. So you're introducing the word,
yeah,
and your objective is that they're going to remember this word. So, in other words, down the line, applying, then you will have them apply those words to sentences. So each one of these stages need to be touched upon in every lesson. So kids need to, if you're opening up a brand new topic, but if you're continuing with the topic, then you don't have to necessarily do. So remembering, understanding, applying, how are they going to apply what they already learned? Analyzing, so if you're reading if you're teaching like a reading passage, analyzing what the passage is saying, the comprehension of the passage, so on and so forth. Evaluating and creating, and that's creating at the very end. They're able to use whatever they've learned and they're remembering it, and they can use it in some creative way in doing something. So every level of learning has an appropriate set of active verbs that you can use to write measurable objectives. So these things are really good to have along with in that lesson plan book of yours. So you need to avoid verbs such as know, understand, appreciate, learn, because they're way too general. These words are just too general. They don't say anything. Be familiar. I don't know about analyze, but because I think analyze is something very specific. So, but everybody has their own ideas. And then others that don't express a result, you can qualify and assess. So analyze, you can. If you have a discussion and the children or the students are analyzing something that you've put in front of them, or a reading passage, or analyzing how to use the words, or analyzing breaking up a word to pronounce it, whatever it might be. So you can qualify that for sure. So here are verbs for each one of these levels, the text, the level of learning. So the first one is remembering. So here are the verbs. Define, so you say, the class will be able to define the vocabulary words today, something. Or recall if you're doing a review. Recognize, list, name, repeat, all of these. These are things that you could use, and you don't have to answer all of these verbs. Like that video said, maybe 3 objectives, right? Because you're not going to pile all this in one lesson. And then understanding and applying. Here are active verbs for that. Describe, identify, locate, discuss, differentiate, implement and interpret, sketch, solve, construct, perform, find, whatever. So assessing student progress is easy by looking at whether or not the lesson objectives were met. So that's another thing. So you have on each student in this book, you have each student listed. And then you have alongside for that day or that week or that 2 days or for 3 days or whatever, you have the objectives that you were hoping they met, and you can then hopefully assess them with a test, with something at the end, and then you give them a grade and you follow along. So you follow along with these grades that build up over the year or the semester or the quarter. And you follow along with the lesson plan. So the lesson plan is in tandem with your assessing your students. And so by the end of quarter, semester, year, whatever, you have all of their grades. So it's not such a scramble to go back and look through each one of the students' works and stuff like that. You do it as the lesson is completed. Okay, so you'll be able to identify whether the lesson was a success and should be used with future students. So some lesson plans fail, you just check them. Don't let them get mixed up in things that have been successful. And then just keep using the ones that are successful. And the more experience you have, the more creative you'll be, and you can venture off of that lesson plan into something that pops in your head, something that applies, but something that you find, oh, it's today, because you already know what you're going to teach today. Well, I think I'd rather change that YouTube for this, or I'd rather play this game, or whatever it might be. But in the beginning, you kind of like that YouTube said, you don't want to have the lesson plan in front of you while you're teaching, but bullet points. You want to know what that lesson is all about before you start teaching. So you'll be able to identify whether the lesson was successful or not. Students will have a clearer picture of what they should take away from the lesson and why the lesson is important if you share the objectives with them. So often, younger students, you will have the objectives up on the board, or you'll have today's objectives on a whiteboard of some sort, or a flip chart or something. And teachers usually have their students read aloud the objectives so that the students kind of have an idea of what's being expected of them. What elements should an effective ESL lesson objective have? There are 3 main elements that every lesson objective should include. Specific. ESL learning objectives should always be specific and relate to the main topic of the lesson. So for example, if you're teaching the simple past tense, all lesson objectives should refer to the learning stages of studying the simple past tense. I think that's obvious. And measurable. Now that's not necessarily as obvious, but ESL lesson objectives should be measurable. Your students need to produce language that clearly demonstrates their understanding of the lesson content. Think about what students student actions you can observe to assess whether the lesson objectives have been met. Student-centered. Objectives in ESL lesson planning should be student-centered, of course, in order to be effective. So in other words, what will the students be able to do? And that means they've done an awful lot in this lesson. So you should have a ton of measurable objectives and learning skills, things that they've learned through the lesson. And then timing. Timing is always hard. If you haven't taught the lesson before and it's new, and you can be an experienced teacher but have a new lesson and new timing to it, then it's a little difficult. You need to just kind of read through it, see how viable all of the sections of it are. Can you really get this done in 10, 15 minutes? So, and you know, all you got to do is try it. Nobody's gonna shoot you. Nobody's gonna fire you just because, you know, I mean, you just have to jump in as a new teacher. You just got to jump in and try every lesson that you have planned, and not to worry. Do not worry. So it's crucial to plan how much time you think each part of your lesson plan will take, so that you have enough material, not too much. I mean, you can have too much. There's nothing wrong with having too much. You don't have to use it, but to teach the lesson well within the allotted class time. Try including one optional activity at the end of the class to anticipate any leftover time you might have. So if you're really precise, some teachers are, then maybe you'll have a lesson plan, and everything that you do, you'll start a timer. And for young kids, that's usually a good thing. For older, not such a good thing. But for younger kids, they know that they have and letting them know too how much time they have left. So if it's a game or something, you want to say, okay, we have 10 minutes to do this activity. And then when you start the timer, okay, I'm starting the timer, we have 10 minutes from now. And then you tell them, okay, we got 5 minutes, 2 minutes, so that they don't just, you know, mess around. Younger kids tend to mess around a lot. So that helps. If you're teaching young kids, it really helps you get your lesson and the timing down. When you're teaching older, no. And you should be flexible, more flexible when you're teaching older students compared to young students. So when creating a lesson plan, you must take into account how many students you have and their age and English level. These factors will shape your entire lesson. And noting these details on your lesson plan will make it easier to reuse the plan for future classes. And that's your objective. You want to be able to reuse your lesson plans. So, and then you need to anticipate problems. And usually with younger kids, you could have a problem with kids not transitioning, you know, quickly enough, kids talking, having to stand and wait for them to get it together. I mean, there are, with younger kids, a variable number of things that could go wrong. So you have to know that you have to be flexible, you have to be understanding, you have to be patient. And if you didn't get to a certain part of your lesson plan, well, heck, what, you know, nobody's the wiser, just as long as they've got, you know, they've got most of all of the information. If that's true and you don't get to every aspect of it, then the next day in your period that you give for review, you can add on to it. And you can give an extra little game or class or, I mean, activity or whatever's kind of left over. This could include, and these are the problems, this could include providing fast finisher activities. So half your class gets finished and the other half is still working. And that you don't, as for young kids especially, you don't want that half of the class that's finished to start talking to one another and start wanting to get up. Then you lose their focus and it's very difficult to get them back. So you make sure that you have kids, that you have activities for kids who finish early, and you let them know, okay, any of you that finish within the 10 minutes, before the 10 minutes, raise your hand and I'll give you another activity. So this is going to keep them working and focused on what you're doing, so you can transition much easier. Reducing side conversations during group work, of course, or dealing with a technological issue, having a plan in place ahead of time to deal with these types of problems will allow you to remain calm and in control during the class. So timing is something that is really important in classroom management, for sure. It helps you get through the class, and and I think I've always been a little lazy on using the timer because I've taught older kids mostly. So when it comes to teaching younger kids, I do know that using that timer up on the board or having them hear it, TikTok or something going on, that they know that they only have so much time. So teaching method. Then many teachers have preferred ESL teaching methods that they use to plan their lessons. An example of a teaching method is task-based learning, project-based learning, student-based learning. So which uses real-life scenarios to practice the language, or it uses that you will have discussion groups. And so you put them in groups, and that way it's student-centered. Gets away from you and puts it on them. And I know you guys are all aware of what this task-based learning is, and the project-based learning is about, right? Yeah. Okay. Hold on. So if you subscribe to this method of teaching, you want to cater your lesson plan to activities that use real-world language practice. Keeping a teaching method in mind can be helpful for organizing information and activities during the lesson planning stage. So keeping it real-world language. What is that? What kind of activities would you put into real-world language? How would you define that? Or what is an activity you would do?
It reminds me about the role play.
And the role play of what? Like what?
Like
Think of a topic.
Conversation,
but
traveling,
more real.
travel or favorite, more real favorite food.
Yeah.
Favorite food. Yeah.
Restaurant menus.
Restaurant. Yeah.
Going to the doctor, talking on the phone. And these are like beginning, asking for a bus schedule, all kinds of things. And with younger kids, of course, real life is, if you're teaching, say, clothing, you have, and I know we saw a video on this, I think it was in China. The teacher had the kids bring in extra clothes, and they all put on extra clothes and went up in front of the classroom and described their clothing. So got them involved in the activity. And then it brings it, they can relate to that. They have a picture in their mind of what they just learned. So real world is so important, only because it's something that everyone can identify with. So as a teacher, you need to kind of bring that in as much as possible into your lessons. you want them to be able to identify it and take and have a picture in their mind of what it is, right? So, yeah. So that is a really good method for teaching language for sure. So how do you write ESL lesson plans? I know I keep asking this question over and over again, and I give you some and some answers. But if you choose to create your own lesson plans from scratch, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Believe me, there are lesson plans for every level of English classes. There are lesson plans out there that you can grab off of the internet. And today you can even have AI create a lesson plan for you. And, if you're going to teach colors, then AI, I've never had AI do a lesson plan, but I'm sure they probably do a very good job of it. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You aren't the very first teacher who ever tried to get a room of young learners to understand a concept, and you won't be the last. So there are sites like Teachers Teaching Teachers, or Teachers Helping Teachers, something like that. There's a lot of teacher sites that these days, of course, sometimes you have to pay for them, but that have a trove of information for new teachers. So use a variety of frameworks for your lesson plans and research the ways that experts consider to be most effective for different levels, learners, and situations. So this is some methods, the PPP method, and this is a tried and true method that people use. You present, you practice, you have them produce. The PPP is very widely used. So a classic method with higher teacher input at the beginning, which is you present. And that's probably true with everything. The teacher needs to teach the skill or whatever, the topic, the vocabulary, whatever, before they can go off and practice it. And then before they can reproduce it or produce something using it. So this is a system that you can follow, an easy and tried and true and good method. The TTT method is to teach, test, teach, and then test again. So you test to see what they know, what background knowledge do they have in this topic, and then you teach the topic, and then you test them again. So drop students into a task that has new concepts. So this is kind of learning by flying at the seat of your pants in the very beginning. You're going to test them and see what do they know. Check what they already know and give feedback, and then repeat the task to demonstrate progress made. Growth mindset learning. Explicitly persuading students of their own ability to learn new things and apply them with space to make mistakes. So you want to reinforce this growth mindset that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. We all learn our own way. It's all okay, to make mistakes. Of course, once you've learned something and you should have acquired the knowledge of it, then you should make fewer mistakes. So here is another another lesson plan. So this is learning objectives, listen for main ideas and details, pronouncing numbers and reading statistics, and using language to make the comparison as or like, probably. So here you've got grammar, page 90, 25 minutes. The business of cranberries. These are the pages. You have 30 minutes for that. You got 20 minutes for Two Truths and a Lie, which is a little, I'm sure you've played that, which is a little game, kind of a icebreaker. I would have done that in the very beginning before all the grammar, but then here, I guess they've decided not to do that one. You didn't have time for this activity, it says. I assigned it as homework. And then writing questions for an entrepreneur. So go over directions and write questions in groups and so on and so forth. I don't think that's, yeah. So this, of course, is older students. It doesn't have the level or anything, but this shows you time-wise. And more than likely, if it's business of cranberries and all of that, it's probably a business English class. So you can look at this. You could also, whoa, how did that, oh, sorry. Come back. Come back. Nope, you didn't come back. What? I know you're somewhere. Here you go. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, you finally finished teaching your lesson. Your students have completed all of their tasks, and then you realize you still have time left before class ends. Oh no! Since you don't want to waste this unexpected time away, you can easily turn it into a fun and educational moment by having a few ESL filler activities up your sleeve. So I tell you, what is it called? Hangman. It's used in every class. I mean, I tell you, if I play Hangman one more time, but it's always fun. You can open up a class with Hangman, and you can use a vocabulary word, and you can play it a couple times and use the vocabulary words that you're going to teach that day in that lesson. So that just gives them a quick introduction of new words. And by having a few ESL filler activities up your sleeves, you'll never have a wasted moment. Oh, I'm almost done. Okay, I kind of rushed through this, sorry. So, speaking of timing, these structured activities will keep the tone light and fun while continuing to incorporate lesson material. ESL activities for young learners and teens center around, of course, we've talked about it, games, songs, and rhyming. The fun isn't limited to your younger students, though. There are tons of ESL filler activities for adults, as well as that encourage conversational speaking and intonation. In all honesty, the best teachers synthesize these methods into their own unique personalities and build on them over time. So if you are a newbie, practice using them on their own for a while, for a whole lesson to get a feel for that and what could be useful for your own circumstances. So you kind of use this and use that, and then you end up creating a whole lesson the way you want to do it. And where can I find free ESL lesson plans? I don't know if these are really up to date because technology changes so quickly. But even if you know how to write lesson plans, that doesn't mean you don't want access to free pre-made plans to mix it up in class and also save time. They can be especially helpful for new and easy teachers, as creating an entire curriculum plus hundreds of lesson plans from scratch is very, very time consuming. So hopefully before you start a class, you'll have an idea of what the curriculum is, of what is expected of you. You'll have an idea of the textbook. Hopefully you will have been able to go through the textbook. The textbook usually is your curriculum. So each lesson, like I remember being in Saudi Arabia, and we would be given one page to teach for a whole morning. That was it. one page out of a book, and we had to supplement it. So obviously they didn't have a lot of materials, and obviously they were relying on their teachers to do all this. So, you know, it depends on where you are and where you're teaching and what you're teaching and who you're teaching. So here's some, British Council is always good. Busy teacher, that's what I was trying to think of. Internet TESOL Journal, English is a piece of cake. These are always, I'm sure these still have, usingenglish.com. So you can go in and look at these. And okay, and now we have one more little YouTube. It's a little bit more in depth, I think.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck, Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application in helping me write my
Elements of a good lesson plan. Teaching is much more likely to be successful when guided by a clear and complete lesson plan. The key elements of a good lesson plan include objectives, timing, sequencing, differentiation, assessment, and materials. The first important question you should ask when designing a lesson plan is, what will students learn in this lesson? Think about the specific knowledge, skills, awareness, and language you want students to learn in the lesson. Make the objectives reasonable and attainable. That is, make sure that the objectives can be reached within the time you have for the lesson. In order to know if a lesson's objectives are reached, the objectives need to describe something that can be measured. Because of this, a lesson plan objective should describe behavior that can be observed. Good lesson plan objectives describe what students should be able to do after the lesson, not what they will know. So, for example, an objective of this current lesson is for readers to know the key elements of a good lesson plan. To word this in a way that can be observed and measured, we can say that after this lesson, participants will be able to describe the 6 key elements of a good lesson plan. Sequencing describes what will happen during the lesson, the order in which it happens, and how you will transition between activities and to the next lesson. Considerations for sequencing could include when is the best time to do a certain activity, and what is a logical but meaningful way to organize the lesson. The sequencing of a lesson should support the lesson's learning objectives. Many lessons follow this structure: warm-up, introduction to the class topic, presentation of material, one or more activities for students to practice, evaluation of the practice, and application to a relevant activity. We want learners to be able to apply their new knowledge and skills to authentic, real-world situations. One of the best ways to achieve this is by slowly removing the teacher as a director. Activities early in a lesson should include more direct guidance from the teacher. As the lesson progresses, learners should be given more independence. At the same time, we are moving students from more surface-level memorization and identification tasks to higher-level interactions with lesson material, such as applying, analyzing, and synthesizing. While it is important to be flexible when teaching, it is also important to estimate how long each part of the lesson will take. This will help organize activities and determine what is possible to do in a lesson. Never forget that learning takes time. Make sure to give your students plenty of time to process an activity or engage in new learning. You will have a variety of students in your classroom. How will you support students who need extra help and students who need to be challenged more? When writing your lesson plan, make sure to include details about student interaction. For example, will they be doing pair work, individual work, group work, or be listening to the teacher presenting information? Make sure that your lesson includes a balance of interaction during the class, as this can help with differentiation and create a learning environment that is productive for multiple learning styles. Providing detailed notes in a lesson plan regarding what challenges students might have and how you might avoid or lessen the impact of these challenges can help a teacher adapt for differentiation. For assessment of student learning, how will you know what students have learned? How will you know if the learning objectives were met? Will you ask your students comprehension questions? Will there be a short presentation, drills, a short quiz, a written assignment, or a group activity where students must use new learning to complete the task? For assessment of the overall lesson, do you leave time at the end of the lesson to gather feedback? Is there a space for you to take notes on the lesson plan? After each class, try to find the time to reflect on the lesson and identify what worked and what did not. In order to implement a good lesson, you need to know what materials will be necessary. This can include books, pens, handouts, and so on. Making sure to obtain the necessary materials before class is important, as it saves time and helps teachers feel more prepared. Now that we have looked at the 6 essential elements of a good lesson plan, your next step is to take a comprehension quiz, which will not only help you review these concepts, but also think through why these 6 elements should be included in a lesson plan. Here are the references used for this presentation.
This is how I used AI to optimize my schedule. What if I told you that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts? This principle is called the Pareto principle.
Okay. All right, so shall we review what elements are important in a lesson plan? Let's see, hold on one second. Yes, the homework. So I already did say that in the very beginning. Create a lesson plan that you can follow and present to the class. Turn the lesson plan in on Populi and then present it next week, okay? All right, and so let's go through the 6 elements, important elements to a good lesson plan. Number 1. Number 1.
Yeah, number 1 is objective.
Okay. Objectives. Why don't you guys take a few minutes and see if you can write down the 6 elements. You don't necessarily have to have it in order. I can't even remember them. I don't have a list of them, only on the video. So we can look at it one more time if you'd like, not the whole video, but that one section. Oh, it's hot.
Elements.
Are you guys done writing, jotting them down? Don't wait for me.
I don't remember the 6, but I only remember 5, I think, from the
Oh, you
video.
remember 5, okay. How about you, Ruth? How many you get?
5.
You have 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Hannah, you guys come show me your faces. If you're still here, come show me. Show me that you're still here. Hello. Petra?
She's not here.
Hannah's not here and Petra's not here?
Yeah, she's left.
They can't just leave. All right, so the 2 of you. Okay. What are one of them, Aaron? What's one of them?
The 5 I remember is
No,
first
no,
the
just give
object.
me one. Go back
Oh,
and
there is
forth.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think for me, I got is the timing. The
Okay.
timing and the difference.
Differentiation.
Yeah, differentiation. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think that is coming to me. I think very I never noticed that before. So yeah, through the video, the presentation is really helped me to make a good plan in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Ruth, what did you get?
Assessment.
What did you write down?
Assessment.
Oh, assessment. Okay. What else? Anything else? We got timing,
And,
differentiation, assessment,
and material.
materials. Good. Okay, and I know Aaron said objectives in the beginning. Okay, so then we got 5. What's that one? That last one?
Your next step is to take a comprehension quiz,
No, no. Wait.
which will not only
Why is this out of focus? Okay, wait, because it's moving through. That's weird that it's out of focus. Okay.
Now that we have looked at the 6
Objectives, timing, sequencing. I think we all forgot sequencing. Differentiation, assessment, and materials. So as Erin said, she thought that timing and differentiation would be the most difficult in putting together a lesson plan. What about you, Ruth? What do you find? Have you found certain aspects of the teaching?
Well, the assessment is good to include in my plan, because before I didn't think about it, this assessment part much in my plan.
Not the assessing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're really hard to hear. Okay, good. All right, so since everyone has left us, I guess I'll leave you. So thank you. Go in if you need to. I will, I don't know if I posted the PPP, but the PPT, but I will. And the homework I haven't written out either, but you can go in there in the next 10 minutes and I'll have everything posted. Okay, and I need to stop.